All right, guys, welcome to quarantine version of In with the New and XFL podcast. We've been away. It's been a crazy, stressful time for a lot of us. Me and Jordan here are in our own homes, and we're just coming to you guys talking a little bit about XFL football. We know it's been canceled, and it's quite a heartbreaking experience for a lot of us because we're like, we just started getting in the flow. I feel like, Jordan, right? We're getting into this thing, and then all of a sudden, boom, ripped from our souls is the XFL, and this fun new league is no more for the remainder of time. And man, we were getting the last episode. We was like right as soon as we posted it, all this stuff kind of came out. So it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was a mid-season last episode. It was exciting. Playoffs were kind of on the horizon, so
Yeah.
we were going to be able to see what that was like. Now we won't get the shot. It's all just a big bummer. No other
Yeah.
way to put it. But first off, how are you doing, Micah? How's the transition been for you?
I've been all right. Yeah, it's not been too terrible. I feel like most of our classes that we take for college hasn't been too bad. Like most of it's just pretty easy to do online. I feel like for our major and the stuff that we're doing. But yeah, I'm glad that we still get to do this. It's been crazy because we got told like what, a week ago or 2 weeks ago? What was it?
It was
When
2 weeks ago,
two
about,
weeks ago,
yeah.
yeah, was it? And that we, had to get off campus and that we're no longer allowed to stay there and that whole thing. So all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what the heck? So that's why we've been away from the channel, and that's
Just a
why,
brief hiatus. No biggie.
yeah, we had to figure out our lives for a second and figure out where the heck we're gonna go live, go back home, and figure out that whole thing. So
Yeah.
glad to be kind of settled in now, and I think we're all ready to, just talk a little bit about off season in the XFL and kind of what this whole coronavirus pandemic thing is going on. So
Yeah, well, so just to kind of, if anyone's unaware, although no one shouldn't be aware of what's happening, the big coronavirus, it's coming into the U.S. We're now the leading, in terms of cases in the country out of any other countries. We're number one. So everything's just basically shut down, and that includes sports. The XFL didn't move as quickly in terms of, the inevitable in terms of it being canceled. I feel
yeah,
like obviously NBA, they canceled immediately once one of their players had it. Then baseball followed, hockey followed, and then the XFL kind of took a few. It might have been a day or two, but they just were like, "Yep, it's the inevitable." A few players were announced to have it, so and midway through the season, they just decided to cancel it. No more XFL football at all,
yeah.
which is definitely a bummer because that's not the case for NBA or hockey. They're likely going to come back. Only time will tell, but it's just been an absolute bummer to see the XFL, which was a league. Even at the beginning of our podcast, we were like, we hope it's not like previous football leagues in the sense that they just kind of collapse because of finances or because of lack of talent. The XFL had that, but then this awful occurrence happened, and now I'm sure they've lost millions of dollars in terms of investments, and it's just a real bummer
Yeah.
for the XFL.
Still got to pay the players, right? There's a couple of those things that are going on, and it's not nice of Vince McMahon, the XFL upper guys that are being able to just still be able to pay those guys through the season. But it's like crazy that they even have the money for that. Where is it coming from? And I remember last episode that we were talking about, I remember I was speculating, right? We were like, oh, Seattle, like that was where a big burst of the coronavirus was happening. And we are like,
Yeah.
oh, we were kind of joking around, like, what if there's no fans at the game? And then we are like, messing around with that whole thing. And that was a day before the whole thing kind of just went crazy.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of like, oh, what if, there's no fans? And then it was reported there would be no fans at that game. And then it was a little bit later reported that, boom, they're shutting down the whole league because of this whole thing and sports as a whole. So that, it's just crazy how within 48 hours of us joking around about it turned into this massive global pandemic.
Yeah, but I also I've my argument's been, better to play safe than sorry,
Oh,
especially with
yeah.
sports in terms of physical contact. The football in general is the most contact-driven sport in America, so it makes sense to kind of just put everything, on a halt right now, focus on player safety, and just kind of, hopefully at some point the pandemic will eventually die down. So for people that might be thinking this is a little too extreme, I would present the argument that it's probably not. I think it's better to play safe for sure.
Yeah, especially with a lot of these reports that you're starting to see with like how we're just not even at peak level of outbreak, so it's better to be safe than sorry, so that way that whole diagram and those forecasts become limited in their numbers and stuff like that. So
100%.
I think like moving on into some more positive news, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about kind of like this crisis we're all in right now and how it's kind of affecting the entire world as we know it. A pretty cool thing is, of course, you guys have been seeing this offseason, what's going on with the XFL and the NFL. Some of these XFL players are jumping into the XFL, and that's pretty cool to see. Or the XFL players are jumping into the
Yeah.
NFL. And so, yeah, you want to kick off our list here, Jordan?
Sure. I think the number one obvious, one that stands out to most is PJ Walker. We've talked about him throughout the entire podcast. And we all know that the Panthers, they had their drama with Cam Newton, brought in Teddy Bridgewater. So that's probably going to be their starter once season, comes to fruition. But PJ Walker, man, after he having a brief NFL run after this play
Yeah.
in the XFL, where he was just by far and away the most dominant player in the XFL. He found his way onto the Panthers, or the roster right now. I don't know what the deal was worth or what he got for that, but
Yeah.
definitely probably the biggest headline out of all of them in terms of XFL players making that transition for sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a fun thing to see, especially in the preseason. Because of course, Teddy Bridgewater, they're going to ride him for a while. But the whole connection between PJ Walker and new head coach for the Panthers is Matt Rule, and Matt Rule was a head coach at Temple, so that whole connection makes sense of why he would want PJ, and he's seen the athleticism and the talent that he has at Temple. So,
Yeah,
kind of seeing an upside from him, I think, and be able to learn under a veteran like Teddy Bridgewater is going to be huge for him and his development for his NFL career. And I'm excited to see a little bit of run and shoot offense from Matt Rule and the whole Teddy Bridgewater era here, and
we'll
having
see.
an XF. Yeah,
Maybe Walker can make a run,
I know.
for
Yeah,
Teddy's
be
job.
him.
I'm assuming it's Teddy's job right now, but
Yeah, for sure. But it's definitely
man,
good to see that backup role. Those are huge. You can have a career in that, and
yeah,
being able to compete and push those guys and be. I think it's perfect too with a guy like PJ Walker is if you do have an injury, and Teddy Bridgewater has had a case of injuries in the past, and you have a guy like that can step in and be a dominant starter when he needs to be.
yeah, for sure.
That's cool. Our next guy, Jordan Tumau. Yeah, I feel like we've been saying his last name a million different ways this XFL season,
Your
but
guess is as good as mine, Micah.
I know he's on the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And he got picked up by the Chiefs, and that kind of makes sense, right? Like he's sort of a Patrick Mahomes style quarterback, right? Not as talented, I don't
And
think, and still has a lot more to learn. But definitely, like that makes sense a lot. Like these both those first two quarterbacks to go kind of mirror who the bodies and the type of talent they like to go for.
yeah, I don't think Tamayu, or however you say it, still we're trying to learn, has the arm talent of a Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, but I think it's a great pickup for the Chiefs in the sense that, I don't think they're trying to. Yeah, probably realistically, they're never going to try to get rid of Patrick Mahomes ever.
Oh yeah.
He's just going to be on that. At least they hope he's going to be on that franchise for the remainder of his career. But they can build something up in him. Maybe learn some lessons from Pat, throughout his time in Kansas City, and maybe use him as a trade option.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with trading a quarterback, you can get something spectacular with that. So if he can prove to be an NFL starter, I think they have something in him to where they could, make that team even better. The Chiefs, which they don't need to do much because they won the Super Bowl last
Yeah.
year. But
I
anyways,
think it's a great move too. Like I said earlier, with PJ in that backup role, also having a player like Jordan in that backup spot is going to be key for them because you think back even to this season when Patrick Mahomes was having that knee problem, and then he would be able to take a much more break, a little bit of hiatus, like take care of the body, come back for playoffs, and take us into that Super Bowl long run. When you get a guy like Jordan Tamalu to come in and stinking light it up for when he can. and
Yeah,
having that starter come in and play well. And he's a young guy. He's gonna be able to learn so much under Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like just the ceiling there is very high.
sure.
So I think moving to our next player, this is a guy I really enjoyed watching. I did get to see one XFL game this season in person, and that was the Wildcats versus the Roughnecks. And I guess I saw this guy live in person, and this guy is a sight to behold. He's only 22 years old. It's Donald Parham, tight end for the Roughnecks. He's 6'8", 247 pounds, just a freak athlete. Like 6'8", are you kidding me? And 247 pounds means for 6'8", that's pretty light. And so he's very
Yeah,
lean, very athletic. And he was fourth in receptions, third in yards for this past season. And the LA Chargers pick him up. And I think that's a cool, kind of Antonio Gates type style, right? Having
sure.
that dominant tight end is very, we're used to seeing that over there for the Chargers. And he's definitely a guy to keep your eye on.
Yeah. Well, they have Hunter Henry, right? That's like their number one guy right
Yeah.
now. So yeah, maybe adding him, having a 2 tight end formation. Having him out there, another receiver threat for whoever their quarterback is. No one knows who their quarterback is after getting rid of Rivers. They haven't
Yeah.
really done anything. But, yeah, I mean, come on. There's nothing better than a tall, lengthy tight end with a good
6'8"
hand.
boy up there.
Add on to your
I just
roster.
think of when you got Hunter Henry out there and you got Parham coming out, you got 2 tight ends. Talk about the matchup misham for defenses, right? You got linebackers lining up over these guys. Like, how the heck are you supposed to read the run as a linebacker and then also like, oh no, it's pass, get back in there. Now I got to cover this 6'8" guy who's running like a deer, and it's going to create matchup havocs for defenses, and
Yeah,
it's going to be great for that offense. And whoever that quarterback is, just to have that little safety outlet, you can throw the ball, 7 feet in the air, and the guy barely has to jump to catch it. So it's going to be very nice to have a guy like that.
love it.
So I think our next guy that we're going to talk about real quick is Dravon Askew Henry. Hopefully I said that right. He's defensive back for New York Giants. Or New York Giants picked him up.
Yeah.
And he was on the New York Guardians. So yeah. So he's going to stay in New York. The Giants pick him up. He is the cousin of Darrelle Revis, so that's pretty interesting.
Ooh, Revis Island. Okay.
Yeah, a little NFL connection there. There must have been some sort of nice development or some talking from Darrelle Revis, like, oh, and the Flash, and you get it's not what you know, it's who you know in the league, especially. So it's nice to see him get his shot, and he played well this season. Especially you saw that Guardians defense play so well most of the season.
Yeah, eventually. And I mean, good for him. It's good for him to be able to stay in MetLife, won't have to travel too far.
Yeah.
Especially during this time of havoc.
Yeah.
So
thank God for him, huh?
Yeah, good for him. Congratulations to him.
Yeah. So moving on, we've got there's quite a list here. We've got about 15 guys who have.
Yeah, we don't have to go through everyone.
So,
maybe just
we don't. But there's kind of like the main ones I want to talk about are. We got another guy named Dietrich Nichols, cornerback. The Saints picked him up. He was, let's see here, for the Houston Roughnecks secondary. So he played for the Roughnecks, and he was the interception leader through 5 games. So that's the guy who was making all those picks, all those turnovers. So
yeah,
you make turnovers, teams are going to pick you up because turnovers are everything in football.
especially when you play in the secondary. I mean, that's your goal every time. So. And that Roughnecks defense was phenomenal.
Pretty solid.
So, I mean, yeah, if you're playing on a good defense, you're going to get, scouted. So, congratulations to him.
Yeah. Another guy I want to talk about is DeMarcus Gates, another Houston Roughnecks guy. It seems like Houston Roughnecks, man, they had a stud squad because they're getting all these NFL pickups, and
as they should, to be honest.
No wonder they were running everybody up because they got a seriously talented squad. So DeMarcus Gates, linebacker, Minnesota Vikings pick him up. I like this pick for them because the Minnesota Vikings, they play that kind of ironclad defense style, and he's definitely a guy that's just loves playing football, and because he played in the AAF, he played his XFL. And through 5 games, Gates had 32 combined tackles and a lot for losses. So that's definitely a guy who can just kind of be a plug-and-play player, definitely play some special teams too.
Yeah, and he's got to learn under a great defense there.
Yeah.
So that's exciting to see for sure. Minnesota, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They played great defense for the past, well, I'd say 5 years probably. Once they got
They're gonna run over your. Go careful, the Packers right there, man. He's gonna be
oh,
playing.
watch it, buddy.
All right. Next guy, we've got kind of another guy I want to highlight. I just want to. I think for my last thing here is talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and how they have picked up quite a few players.
Okay.
So that the kind of on the lower end of this list, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers just picking up a whole bunch of people. So they got Calvin Walker. He led the XFL in sacks for the New York Guardians with 4.5. He's a defensive end for Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh picked him up.
Mm-hmm.
Jaron Jones, offensive lineman, Pittsburgh Steelers picked him up. He's, like I said, offensive lineman. And then they picked up Tyreek Kinnell, safety. He had 16 tackles in 5 games with the Defenders. And then they also picked up, I kind of like this pick as well. It's Christian Kuntz. He's a linebacker / long snapper. So it's always nice to get those players who, can play multiple positions, and those players can also, like, say you don't have to carry a backup long snapper because you've got a guy who can play dual positions, and that opens up another roster spot for the 53-man roster when they have to finally get down to it. So players like that are really key. So it's kind of interesting seeing the Pittsburgh Steelers pick up 5 or 6 guys to be able to move forward from the XFL. It seems like they were doing a lot of scouting and they liked what they were seeing.
Might as well, yeah. I mean, as we've said before, the XFL was the closest thing to professional football that
Yeah.
in a long time. So, good on the Pittsburgh Steelers for taking advantage of what we saw throughout the past few weeks for XFL football.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to mention, and we mentioned it before we started, like, not all these players will get a roster spot once the regular season comes to play. As we
Mm-hmm.
know, that roster declines to 53 once the regular season begins, to 90, you said, right?
Yeah, I think 90 in the preseason, 53 man when it's all original. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who ends up making the cut, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that when that all rolls around in the fall. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, but I mean, really, it is nice to see, because ultimately the XFL, it is a league for entertainment, and it's a league to have football when
Yeah,
football is not supposed to be played. But also, it is a chance for these young players who could not get drafted to, or were released by previous clubs in the NFL, to get their chance to make their way into the Premier Football League, which is the National Football League.
yeah,
So it's exciting to hear, even through this time where sports is under a big question mark right now, it's nice to see that some of these players are getting their opportunities to at least make a roster. And obviously, we hope nothing for the best for them. We want
yeah.
these XFL guys to succeed in the NFL as much as possible.
Because I think when you start to see these guys, like, what was it, a list of 15 or 16, like that was a pretty big list just
Yeah,
for, and we're early in the system right now. Who knows when training camp comes around? Maybe they're just going to ask for more people, more bodies for camp, and so then you're
yeah,
going to be able to get your body, your play in front of coaches who are the best, and be able to maybe jump on a squad is a big deal. And I think that's what we're all like rooting for in the XFL, right? These stories that we're hearing of guys with redemption, guys who being able to fight through the adversity and then eventually get on the way through that adversity and be able to make it their dream goals, the NFL. So that's pretty awesome.
sure. I'm still thinking we have to see Perez. Perez
Yeah,
has to get his spot, man.
I know he was looking solid. Like that's
Yeah,
what we were talking about at the end of the season there before all of a sudden it abruptly closed. But man, he was looking lights out, and that's a guy that we talked about earlier on that podcast. His story is just incredible.
incredible. So I'm gonna make prediction. I
Okay.
think he ends up with the Chargers because they need someone. Head
Oh,
back to
okay.
LA,
Makes
play in a new
sense.
stadium. I would love to see Perez in that Chargers uniform.
Yeah, that could make sense. He's definitely a guy that he's got an aura of confidence around him, and you're like, he doesn't look like he's not the most flashy guy. We've said
Yeah,
that, but he's got an aura about him that's just confidence, leader. It's kind of one of those intangibles that you look for in your quarterback. The guy that can just people respond to his leadership and his ability to play, and it's going to be very exciting to see that guy be able to make the jump from what was it, ninth on the depth chart from junior college to D2 to Heisman winner for D2 to just the whole 9 yards with his career. And it's just been fun to watch. And I think hopefully he knows how much we like to watch him. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Love to see it.
Yeah. All right. I think, it's a quick little episode today, but I mean, we're getting back in the swing of things with this whole running.
For the next few weeks, I couldn't imagine the episodes being as long as they were before because we don't have much to talk about. Maybe do some player highlights or
profiles, tell our stories, maybe.
Yeah, maybe like dive into like where certain players could fit into the best rosters.
Yeah,
stuff like that. We'll figure that out along the way, but just kind of this episode, an update on the whole coronavirus situation, and also a rundown on players that made it. I think that was a good call by us to make it a little short.
Yeah. So we definitely we're getting back in the swing of this thing. We're going to be starting to continue to release those episodes on Wednesday evenings. So hopefully you guys will still be able to enjoy those. It's the XFL. It's the off season now for XFL. It's the off season for football. So we got nothing to really watch. So might as well watch the podcast and share it, and like it, and subscribe. So we get all that football information for you guys.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we're done. Jordan, we'll see you next week, buddy, from the Zoom call. All right.
That's right.
Talk to you later, man.
All right. Bye.
How do I stop the recording?